Violence, tyranny, intrigues, power. These are the words we think of when we are watching a good action movie with a good story. They're also the words that begin Medieval, a movie about Jan Žižka, a 15th century Bohemian general and his trials and tribulations. This is a general that never lost a battle, despite losing sight in one and then both of his eyes. Agree with his politics or not, he is an archetype for a true hero. It's not often we get movies with well-written characters lately. So let's dive in, shall we? Now, I've made it a habit, quite unintentionally, to go into a movie blind, not knowing anything about the general story or characters. So watching this movie, not knowing what I was getting into, I was expecting something closer to The Northman. But what I ended up getting was a historical biopic, and a well-done one at that. The movie begins with an assault on a caravan, a typical occurrence back in those days. Any kind of distant travel was extremely difficult and expensive back then because of roving bands of marauders sacking everyone they came into contact with. Life was really rough back then. The caravan is rescued by a group of knights led by Jan Žižka, played by Ben Foster, who is a knight in the king's army. It turns out that the caravan was carrying Žižka's advisor and confidant, Lord Boris, played by Michael Caine. From here, they traveled to the king's castle in Bohemia, where King Wenceslaus IV rules very weakly as both King of Bohemia and Roman Emperor. He's constantly being undermined by Henry III of Rosenborg, who keeps sacking his lands until one of them starts resisting. Rosenborg had nearly all of Žižka's family killed, so obviously he wants revenge. He kidnaps Rosenborg's fiancée, the niece of the King of France, played by Sophie Lowe, to force mistakes and chip away at Rosenborg's army. Well, there's your palace intrigue right there. The movie ends with showing Žižka rising up to lead the Bohemian army. I think this could have been a miniseries as there's so much more historical material still left to be told, but a 2-hour biopic was all that the producers had budgeted for. The cinematography was gray and bleak, showing how rough life was back then. It was a nice touch filming in the native Bohemian lands in the Czech Republic, too. The real castles used added to the authenticity of the film. The plot was windy and labyrinthine, showing just how twisted medieval politics were. It was an interesting time in Europe, just prior to the Protestant Reformation, which saw many groups vying for power and control, not just in Central Europe, but throughout the whole continent. The film did a superb job of showing those power struggles. The acting was very well done, not too overacted, with a very capable cast of actors. Ben Foster is a force of nature. This guy has been quietly plugging away in Hollywood over the years. He's been in such fantastic movies as Hell or High Water and Lone Survivor, the latter of which whet the actor's appetite for films based on real events. I've said it in my review for Hell or High Water, Ben Foster can really act. He really steps into each role he plays and gives it his all. You can tell he did his research on Jan Žižka because he plays the role with a respect you don't see many actors give. Foster is a solid actor that I sure wish would get more roles. As old as he is getting, Michael Caine still puts in a solid performance and doesn't just phone it in as he did with Tenet. He's got a decent amount of screen time and shows his well-known gravitas in every scene he's in. As with The Northman, this movie did not get much press. The real-life character of Jan Žižka is not very well known outside Central European history. It's nice that the producers of the film undertook this story because it needed to be told. The major problem in Hollywood these days is the lack of good character development. Too often, we get these infallible Mary Sue characters with no flaws or struggles, and it's just boring. The story of Medieval showed the struggles that Jan had to undertake on his road to becoming a capable and successful military leader. Finding strength through internal suffering, helping others against insurmountable odds, are the qualities of a real hero, and it's these qualities that are sorely lacking in films today. Despite not being well-known subject matter, Medieval suffers from the problems plaguing good Hollywood films today. It's not a small independent film, nor is it a big-budget extravaganza. although it was the most expensive Czech film ever made to this point. It's a middle-of-the-road film telling a good story with good characters. To its own detriment, Hollywood has bifurcated, and it leaves very little room for films such as Medieval to succeed at the box office. Just like The Northman, it just doesn't have enough money to market itself properly. Moreover, these types of movies are not being marketed very well, and professional journalists are a huge part of the problem. As Matt Taibbi explains in his book Hate Inc., the newer generation of journalists are just spoiled rich kids from Ivy League schools whose only intention in journalism is not to provide exposition to the news, but to get closer to the power centers of society. Many people calling themselves journalists only want to suck at the power teat as hangers-on, so they wouldn't dare go against the woke message of Hollywood. They can't review a movie like Medieval well because it doesn't meet the arbitrary quota for diversity. Newsflash! This is a story that takes place in medieval Central Europe. There's no people of color in that area of the world during that time in history. These professional reviewers crap on this movie unjustly, but people are wising up to these shenanigans, and you see audience scores much higher than professional critics on sites like Rotten Tomatoes. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention respect yet again. This film is respectful to the history and the historical figures of the time. It shows how much suffering it took to get to the comforts we have today centuries later. The actors also played their roles with great respect. Ben Foster took his role very seriously, and it shows through on screen. I did not see Foster, I saw Jan Žižka. It's this level of respect that more films should have, not just for the source material, but for the audience. Honor, justice, freedom, faith, hope. These are the words we think of when we think of a hero in a good story. They're also the words that end Medieval, and it's just these words that tie up the central theme of the movie. We've forgotten what heroes are and what good men do. The woke Twitterati have no honor and no sense of true justice. They don't know how to fight for the ideals of freedom because they lack faith and hope. This film shows the true grit it takes to stand up for what's right. It shows the strength of character required to be a leader. With a complete crisis of leadership going on throughout the world, Medieval is a great film to remind us what real leadership looks like. I highly recommend everyone see this film, especially in theaters. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more great content.